Today's webinar is going to be on how to build a product launch roadmap. And it's one of these areas that I think that'll dramatically improve how you communicate with your stakeholders. All right, so hi and welcome everybody. I'm Dave. I am going to be your host today. I'm the founder of Launch Clinic, and I refer to myself as a launch coach. So hopefully everything is loud and clear. So if I could get a thumbs up from everybody that you hear me okay, or pop something in the chat, that'd be appreciated. All right, I'm seeing thumbs up. All right, very good. All right. So anyway, what I'd like to do is, before I get going, you know how webinars work. You got to talk about, something that you really want to talk about before you get into the meat of it. So a little bit about Braincraft, and that is we're the creators of the product launch framework, the Braincraft product launch framework. And I'm not going to go into the details of it other than to say this is the cornerstone of everything we do. So if you want to learn more about it, definitely go to the Braincraft website at braincraft.com. You can get all the detail you want, including there's a brief little video that gives you an overview of it all. Now, the other thing I want to talk to you about is one thing we have today, and something I'm really excited about announcing today. So all of you are the first to hear about this. So we already have a product launch boot camp, and that product launch boot camp is on demand. But and it's got a lot of great content. But we got a lot of feedback from people who go, I'd really like to have a human. And I'd love to interact with you, Dave, or anybody who's involved with and really understands this framework well, to help us apply what you do to our environment. And so I'm super pleased to announce that we're going to be offering a live version of the Product Launch Bootcamp. We're calling it Product Launch Masterclass Live. And it starts on April the 6th. And so the way it's going to work is there's going to be 4 3-hour sessions. They're going to be paced out over a week apart. So it'll be over 4 weeks. And the purpose for that is so that you can apply what is being taught in the class and what you're learning, and attach it to your own product launch. So that's coming up. I'll make sure that everybody hears about it via communication, via email or other way, but just wanted to let you know about that. Super excited about it. All right, so let's get started. So one of the things I'm really proud to have with me today is Steve Johnson. And Steve has been a great friend, a collaborator, a partner in crime for many, many years. I won't even tell you how long ago that Steve and I met, because it's way too long. But if you could give us just a quick little overview of who you are and what you do, and then we'll dive into it.
Usually people do. I've known Steve a long time, which adds a decade every time they say long or old in that story. But nowadays I'm working with teams on creating a nimble planning process, because it seems to me that most teams have too much process and not enough, work. We're always just talking about doing stuff. So I've been working with generally small teams, 10 or 12 people, on how to do the best turning ideas into market, which is based on my book called Turn Ideas into Markets. No, that's not right. Turn Ideas into Products.
Mm-hmm. Am I pointing in the right direction now? Yeah.
That's correct.
Good. All right. All right. So anyway, we're going to have a little fun today. Steve and I, just so you know, we don't get terribly serious about things. So we like to have a lot of fun. Between the two of us, I think I started in the business about the same time Steve did, which was just shortly after the American Civil War. So we've been doing this a very, very long time. So let's just dive into it. And I want to talk to you about, I'm just going to show a few slides. We're going to go through it quickly. I'm going to give you a good background of it, and then get to opening up questions as quickly as possible. All right. So See if this will work, Steve. Oh, look at us. We're in the little corners. So
Oh, that's a
what is
new
the problem?
innovation.
What's that, Steve?
That's a new innovation since I last saw
That's
you.
there you go. So I'm a giver, just like to please. So the one of the big problems that I've learned through the years with communicating the status of my launches with my stakeholders is I just never seem to get it right. I'd please part of my audience, but I wouldn't please another part of my audience. I'd either have too much detail or not enough detail. So what I'd like to share with you is a technique that I developed that it's been used by a lot of folks in a variety of forms, but it's super, super easy to do. But what's the problem with launch communication? It primarily we give too much detail. You know, we throw a bunch of stuff at our stakeholders in a meeting, or we send them a link to go look at something, and all it really does is it triggers a whole lot more meetings because what we're providing to them isn't actionable to them. They don't have that insight that says, are we on track or aren't we on track? And all they're really trying to know is the answer to this one question: when will we be ready? Or if there's a hard date, will we be ready? And that's all they care about. They don't care about the nuts and the bolts and the details. So when the CEO says, will we be ready? That means a much bigger thing than will sales have their sales presentation or will the website be updated? So let's dive into it. Here's what I used to give. I don't know if this is what you use, but here's a stylized version of a Gantt chart. And I'd have some version of this, which was a big monstrosity with lots of detail in it. And I would have my guys who are managing the details of the project provide that feedback and what's going on and dive into all the deets and everything. Or if I didn't have someone, it would be me and I'd be the one driving the bus. And it was never good enough. It was good in the right context, but not good enough when I was briefing my executive stakeholders. So it brings us to a definition. Dave, you're talking about a launch roadmap. What is that? What do you mean? Well, a launch roadmap is a cross-functional timeline of how a product is going to be launched. So people can see at a very high level, what is it that, when will we get there? Do we have the resources that you need to be successful? Right? When will things happen? How do the pieces dovetail together without getting into all of the nitty gritty of the sausage making, as it were? So let's build one. It's going to be shockingly simple once I show it to you, but it's really, really a valuable tool. So across the top are columns, and the columns are just week ending. I used to do this in Excel. Super simple. You could set it up in just a minute. Doesn't take you long. So week ending. Now the rows below that are the functional areas. So these would be the different groups like IT or DevOps or support or marketing or whomever you want to list there, sales ops. Right. So that's the starting points. This is the big overview of it. Now, next, what we want to do is we want to map this out week by week. Now, I'm using US style dates. So month and day, use whatever is appropriate and customary in your geography. Then what I would do is I would go and carefully list all the functional areas, and I would usually miss a few. And I would add them as I learned about, oh, I didn't realize that group needed to be involved, or I didn't realize that the launch would impact a different functional area, so I'd add them in. And then what I would do is I would pull from my detailed project plan a high level overview of big deliverables, things that really mattered to my stakeholders. And then I would map these all out. And yeah, it would be a little tedious because I'd have to move deliverables around as the dates adjusted and resources came in and out. but it was always easy to sit down with anybody and map this out if they wanted more detail than a summary, but they didn't want the boredom of a Gantt chart. All right. So, but I learned that they needed more information and they needed this high level summary. So I learned something and I added it in two things, two rows at the top. The first one are major milestones. These are high level things. These are not sales presentation or press release, not that level of detail. They're high level. Like, when's my sales team going to be ready? When are we going to announce the product? When's the product going to be available so customers can actually get it? So then I would map those across the top. Then they needed one more piece of information. What they wanted to know was, what are the key events that are going on in our industry? Things like, when are we throwing the user conference? And when is this our big industry event that everybody has to be at? When is that happening? Or it might be other things like a major governmental regulation. When does it kick in that has an impact on our market? And then I'd have all the summary I would need to sit down and talk to anybody at any time. Now, Steve, how does that differ from your take on roadmaps from a product management point of view?
Well, it's still pretty much the same thing. The big problem we all run into with product roadmaps is we give too much information and too specific dates. And people say, well, this my special feature is not coming out on the day that I've agreed to give it to somebody. But effectively, a roadmap is more like a plan of plans rather than a plan in and of itself. It's the highlights. And a product roadmap should be the same. It should be a prototype of your strategy, not a release plan.
Right. It's here's how I'm going to get to this thing. Here's where I'm going to get to this destination.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I may have to bob and weave along the way because things happen. Right.
Yeah.
Just like with developing a product, right? Even launching a product, you run into problems where a resource is missing, or you had a bad quarter and now you have to do some shifting around a little bit to focus on different things. So these happen. These are everyday events.
And it's the same between launch and release. That product management writes epics, which are these big clumps of deliverables that you're describing. And yet a lot of roadmaps, they say, okay, well, we're going to have support for 1.2 version of technology X, whatever, and it's way down in the details. But fundamentally, you want to be like a deliverable of support for current browsers, not specifically Edge 1.2 and Google whatever they are up to. So it's very, in effect, it's very similar, is my point, that what you're calling deliverables, we would probably call epics.
Got it. All right. So everybody got this, right? It's just a big table. We've summarized everything on a weekly level for each functional area. All right. So that's a good starting point. But now you can decide what you show, and depending on your audience. So if I might be sitting down at a very high level meeting. I've got 5 minutes to give an update on what's going on with the launch. And I might just show, here's week ending, here are major milestones, and here's how this overlaps with some big things that are happening in the market. Like, great. Now, another meeting, I might have more time, and someone's going to want to know more detail. I know the composition of the meeting, and they're going to ask about specific deliverables. Great. I can add that. Now, the next thing we got to do is we got to put it in a way that executives really like. And executives like pictures. They like images. They like visuals. They like to be able to point to things and go, what does that mean? So here we go. I've summarized it for the example to a monthly level. So some of you have big enterprise products or they're products that take a really long time to gestate and get to market. So I've narrowed this down to just summarized it just to a monthly level. So these circles represent months ending. So in January, this is going to get done, and in February, this is going to get done, and so forth. All right, so that's my baseline. That's my starting point in building this. Now, my next thing is what I want to do is I want to start adding in my milestones. So below that timeline, I'm going to drop in those major milestones. Now, let me be clear about a milestone. I am not talking about a specific deliverable. I'm talking about something high level, right? So we're going to announce the product. Here's when it's going to be available, right? A functional area is ready. So really high level stuff. If they want to know the more detail, you've got the detail, so you can dive into it, but start at the higher level. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drop in our market oriented events, user conference, big show, regulatory change, and so forth. All right, so now that we've got that, here's the next big piece. What we're going to do is we're going to drop in rectangles. Now, the rectangles actually mean something, and they're not just sized differently so you can see them. The width and the height have a definition.
Yeah,
What
the
I'm going to do,
vertical is ego, right?
yeah, exactly. Right. So, like for sales, right? Is that what you're saying,
Yeah, that's where
Steve?
I was going.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So, Steve, how you tracking with me so far? You
Yes.
following along with this?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Good
And,
deal.
I did want to rant a little bit, even on months. When you look at a month, people go, now, when you say March, do you mean March 1st at, 0 100 hours, or do you mean, March 2nd? And he's like, no, I mean March 31st or even March 45th.
At 11:59.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it's even there, it's helpful when talking to anyone about dates to be pretty precise. It's like, either we're starting this in January or we're finishing this in March, by the end of March. So I tend to do, even with monthly dates, I tend to say by end of as a label.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what we're trying to illustrate here is I'm going to reveal in the next slide. So hold on to that. Don't worry about the gradients and the colors and all like that. This was just simple setup. But each rectangle would represent one functional area. And at a glance, we can look down and we can see, hey, so when's IT going to be up and running? Okay, I see that. It's going to be somewhere between May and June. When's marketing going to start doing their thing? Well, it looks like the end of April. Great. So, but there's a little bit more to this. Let's take sales as an example. Now, on this, what I want you to notice is that the width of the rectangle represents how much time it's going to take us to get them ready, when we're going to start, when they're going to be ready. Now, the horizontal is the level of effort. So how hard is it going to be during that time frame to get the sales team ready? So you can decide how you qualify effort. Is it the number of resources? Is it the amount of money? It's in other words, it's a relative reference between the two. So if we were looking at this again, at a glance, I can see that it's going to take less effort to get our partners up and running than it will be to get the sales team ready to go. It looks like our planning process should be fairly light, and then you can see the relative level of effort. Now, what this does is it changes the dynamic in your status updates along launch. Right, Steve, do you do something like that on the product side when you do roadmaps?
I don't think I ever have. I focused primarily on the outputs rather than the impact. And that's what I really like about this launch roadmap is there's a big effort here in sales and, lots of opportunity. I mean, lots of resource being used. And that's not anything I've ever articulated it really in a roadmap, except to show in a roadmap that I'm delayed because I've got a limited number of resources or something like that. But
Mhm.
that's a new aspect that I've never seen in a roadmap before. Very unique. I'm sorry,
Okay.
it's unique. You can't be
Thank
very
you.
unique.
No, that's great. Well, the idea here is, everybody is from an executive standpoint, all they're looking at is it sparks questions like, hey, what would it take to get sales up and running quicker? Or why is it taking so much time with IT? What can we do to fix that? And so it creates this relative connection between the cross-functional teams. Each functional team, right, is functional area, and they can see the cross-functional nature of it. All right. So, but hold on, we're not done yet. There's one other piece of communication you can do here. And that piece of communication is to indicate what's done and what's not done. So I might use something like these simple green circles with check marks to indicate that these groups are already done. I might use a yellow with a circle on it, and a yellow circle with a question mark or an exclamation point to say we've got a problem here. Um, I can use other forms of visual communication to bring attention to certain things I want to bring attention to. But it doesn't hurt to have green check marks because it shows progress. All that work is moving forward. All right. So with that, what I'd like to do is just open it up. Steve, let's go back to us. All right, there we go. Any questions, any comments, any techniques that you're thinking about that might complement what we're talking about? I want to open it up. And if you have any other launch related questions, it's fine if it's not related to the roadmap. Oh, Steve, thanks for putting the link to the PowerPoint of that. Appreciate that. Ben, how do you communicate this throughout the organization? All right, so that's a great question, Ben. So there's different ways of doing this. I found that just posting it and having people look at it is not necessarily the best. What I think works the best, at least it worked the best for me, is anytime I could actually be in the driver's seat and walking them through it. You never know who's going to be there in that room, who's not going to be there. Had they seen it before? Are they misinterpreting what they're seeing? So, what I like to do is always either me or someone on the team be driving the bus to explain what's going on. Now, the beauty of this is after you've communicated uh, uh, frequently about the status, or at least as frequently as you need to in your organization, what winds up happening is people go, okay, great. I know about that. I know about that. I know about that. Let's focus on this one rectangle. What's going on there? It looks like you moved it from the last time we got together. So what's going on? All right. So that's how I like to do it, rather than letting people wander around and think about, misinterpret what the information has. All right. Okay. Wayne, is there any value in showing the total effort from all teams together? Ooh, that's interesting. That's interesting, Wayne. Sort of like, are you
Like a
are you
stacked
saying
bar,
what's that?
like a stacked bar, maybe.
Yeah, stacked
Yeah,
bar.
like I'm trying to visualize that, Wayne. Is that what you're thinking about? Are you thinking the totalitarian, I almost said, the total effort by all of the teams, sort of the big picture? How is it relative to maybe another launch that we did? This one's harder than the other one.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm wondering, in a company that's launching a number of different things or has a lot of different efforts going on, you know, at the time that sales is doing that, there's also five other things going on. So like the whole company needs to focus on it at that point. It was just an extension of
Right.
the very helpful, clear graph that you already showed.
Okay, now I understand.
And
Yeah,
that's a really good point.
That's a great point. The thing that that we use to illustrate that, and a lot of bigger companies do this, especially like at different divisions and launching things and centralized resources, is something called launch tiers. And launch tiers are ways of saying, this is bigger than that one. So tier one is typically the big, gigantic launch. We do maybe one or two of those in the year, all hands on deck, all resources go to those. And then there's a lower tiers below that, a tier two and a tier three. But it doesn't show visually the difference between the two, which I really like that idea. So now you're going to have me working all night on something, Wayne. So I appreciate that. All right. Jim, like the visual of this, like Steve said in the roadmap, it's only shortness of the epic list that shows the size and effort. We've got launch tiers. Oh, thank you, Steve. Steve has like been my co-pilot today. He's dropping stuff in the chat with links to articles and so forth. So what's that?
I'm a product manager. I have skills.
You have,
I don't just make things pretty.
You have mad skills. You have forgotten more about product management than most people have learned in their lifetime. So any other thoughts or comments or questions? We are wide open. We can answer any question you want. Anybody launching a product for the first time? Just drop it in the chat. Go, yes. Like, I've never done this before. I'm terrified. I don't know what I don't know. All right. Well, it sounds like we're getting to the end. My intent was basically to cover everything in about a half an hour. I just want to take to appreciate everybody's time. I know that there's a lot of other new Zoom meetings you're going to hop in on. Love your comments about the delivery method that we're using. I'd like to get some feedback on that. So if you want to drop me a note or put something in the chat, how did it work for you? Was the visuals clear, and so forth? So any feedback is good feedback, even if you thought it was awful. So gifts come in all sizes and all packages. Steve, any departing thoughts, comments?
Well, I find that in product roadmaps, we get into too much detail. And I find the same is true for launch roadmaps, that we get into our outputs rather than our outcomes. And I think that's the biggest piece of advice from today is we're not really interested in completion of tasks. We've written the press release. It hadn't gone out, but we've written it. Check. You've accomplished something on a task, but that doesn't belong on the roadmap. The announcement phase has begun, belongs on the roadmap. And again, I think there's some wonderful parallels between the joys and dangers in road mapping, either a product release or a product launch. Very much the same methodology, just, instead of focusing on feature set, we're focusing on initiatives within the marketing team or within the launch team.
Right. We get, because there's so much to do, we get so hung up in the deliverables and how they look and whether one group will like it or one group will hate it. We fail to fall back into what are we trying to do here in the first place? Right. Launching a product is about having some impact on the business in some meaningful way, some material way. It isn't about updating the website, doing a couple of tweets, adding a new presentation or writing some articles or doing some webinars. Those things are all important and they all feed into the overall outcome. And, it surprises me to this day how few companies actually define what their launch objectives are. They don't take the time to say, all right, we're about to launch this product. It's a really big deal. We've spent a lot of money developing it. We're getting ready to go to market with it. And they have no idea what success looks like.
Mhm.
So if I could have one parting comment to everybody, and that is, if you want a successful launch, and who doesn't, then you got to start with a very basic thing. What does success look like? How do we define success?
Mhm.
And from there, now you have a North Star to guide you through everything you do, the strategy, how you ready the organization, the techniques you will use, the methods you'll apply, what deliverables will be useful, which deliverables won't.
Not to
So with
mention
that, I'm
just how important it is, right? I mean, we spend months, quarters, years developing a piece of software, and then we say, okay, time to launch. Let's put out a press release. And,
Mhm.
it's, as I like to say, and I think you do as well, release is the end of a generally long development process, and launch is the beginning of a whole other process, usually with an entirely different team.
That's
And
right.
it seems like we don't take launch quite so seriously. And it's kind of like you got the ball to the 90-yard line, and then then you stubbed it.
Right. Yeah. It's you can't score in the red zone, as they say, right? You've done all the hard work to get there, but you can't score. Sorry for the football reference. For those of you who the American football reference, for those of you who are unfamiliar, it ends with and the other thing you said something that triggered a thought in my head is it's so complicated. Just like developing software isn't a process, it's a set of processes.
Mhm.
It's a collection of processes, and launch is the same way. And for those of you who aren't familiar with my background, I actually started out in development. So I was a software guy, wrote code, managed development teams. I can tell you, it gets complicated. It gets complicated even at a relatively small scale. Why would it be less complicated to launch a product? You've got so many moving parts in your organization. You've got sales, you got marketing. You just check them off. And too often, what we do is we overlook things. We're like, oh, well, sales can sell anything. I talked to the VP of sales and she said so. So all they need to know is, what's my presentation and what do I say? And then they get out there and they struggle because they don't have what they need to be successful. And and building a great product is important, but that won't guarantee success. Right. All right. So Vasu, I joined a few minutes on the webinar. Dave, did you cover what you do after a launch to make sure it's successful and meets the business goals? Yes, we have not covered that. That's a great question. So as part of the framework, let me go in here. I'm going to slide over here. Sorry, Steve. I'm pushing you out of the way. You'll notice that in the launch framework, way over on the left is a circle. We call them donuts. There's a donut called objectives, and that's where launch objectives are defined. And then way over on the right, there's a donut called accelerate. Now, if we look at the donut prepare and then we look at the donut accelerate, one of the things I want to point out to you is that prepare is all about how to prepare the organization, each functional team to make sure that they're ready to support the launch objectives in their own way. Now, the dot between these two, between prepare and accelerate, is what is commonly referred to as the go, no go meeting. And I think we borrowed that all from like NASA and space agencies of how they do that. But the accelerate, so Vasu, the accelerate is where we get into the weeds of measuring what are the metrics that we're tracking that connect with the objectives. So you referred to as KPIs. I like to use OKRs, objectives and key results, but it's essentially the same concept. So what are we tracking to show that we're heading towards our key results? How do I know that we're heading in the wrong direction and we need to investigate and pivot? And how do I know we're heading in the right direction? And so that's the area that we look at. So all of what we measure in terms of launch performance metrics is we establish those in the launch planning step. And then we can also look at, and I'm going beyond metrics just to show that we're ready, that my team's ready. I'm showing we're out the door. Are we building a pipeline? Or is our close rate where it should be? Are we getting enough reference customers? What's the adoption rate look like? All of the stuff that would be relevant in your business model for your type of business. Does that help, Vasu?
And let me also say that a launch is not a date, it's a period.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a launch it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And the problem with launches is most people associate the launch ending with the date we say it's ready, it's available. And that's actually the middle. It's very much the middle. So I would almost say it's the beginning of the middle. So there's a lot more that goes on after the product hits the market. We've got to be able to track its progress and make sure it's achieving the kind of business impact we hoped it would achieve. We're tracking the data to make sure that we know it's heading in the right direction. And with that, we can react to things more quickly than waiting 6 months down the road and having that horrible meeting where all your stakeholders are going, what the heck happened? What went wrong here? That's not a comfortable meeting to be in. All right. Any other questions popping up? A lot of great questions. Anything else? Any stories you want to share? Any comments? All right. Well, let's wrap it up. Thanks everybody for being here. I appreciate your interaction. I appreciate the time. Steve, thank you for being here. He's over there, right? Steve, thank you for being
Glad
here.
to be here.
And
Good to see
the
you.
other way. Oh, you're over the other way on your screen. Okay. Anyway, have a great week. Hope everyone stays healthy, and we'll get this recorded and available so that you can watch it at your leisure. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to hang out for another few minutes if anybody has any questions, but we're effectively done. Thanks, Ben.
Bye.